Welcome to Libyth. Today we're going deeper into the Tsurezuregusa, past the surface of what the essays say, into the structure of what they mean, and the relationship between those two layers, which is closer and stranger than it first appears. On the surface, the essays are about very specific things. The moon, cherry blossoms, the arrangement of rooms, the conduct appropriate to various social situations, the qualities of old masters, the failures of ambitious men, the texture of old age. These are the literal materials, and they are not pretexts for something else. This is worth insisting on because there is a temptation, with a text as philosophically rich as the Tsurezuregusa, to treat the specific cases as mere illustrations of general principles, to read past the moon to the impermanence, past the cherry blossom to the aesthetic doctrine. Kenko is genuinely interested in all of them. The moon is really the moon. The cherry blossom is really the cherry blossom. The overgrown garden is a real overgrown garden that he has looked at carefully. The particularity of his attention, the precision with which he notices the actual specific thing, is what gives the essays their texture and their authority. You trust him because he has clearly looked carefully, for a long time, at a great many things. He is not using the moon to say something about impermanence. He is saying something about the moon, and the impermanence is what the moon turns out to contain when you look at it carefully enough. But beneath the literal surface, and never separable from it, every essay is also an argument about how to see, about what kind of attention produces genuine perception, as opposed to the various substitutes for perception that habit and ambition and the fear of death tend to generate. The moon glimpsed through clouds is not simply more beautiful than the moon seen fully. It is a demonstration of a principle about how the imagination participates in perception. The imagination must work to complete what has been started. It must project the hidden portion, construct the full circle from the visible arc, bring something to the encounter rather than simply receive what has been given. And what you bring to a perception is part of the perception, is, in some cases, the most important part. The complete, fully visible moon asks nothing of the viewer. The moon through clouds requires the viewer to participate. And in that participation, the moon becomes in some sense yours. The moon you complete through the clouds is a moon that your imagination helped construct, which means it is partly a product of your own capacity for projection and completion. You have collaborated with the moon rather than simply observed it. This is where the Tsurezuregusa becomes epistemologically interesting in ways that go beyond aesthetics. Kenko is describing a theory of perception in which the knower and the known are not cleanly separated, in which what you see is partly a function of what you bring to the seeing, and in which the conditions that require you to bring more are the conditions that produce a fuller, richer, more genuinely engaged form of knowing. This runs against the ordinary assumption that the most complete knowledge is the knowledge achieved under the most complete conditions: full light, full visibility, complete information. Kenko's essays suggest the opposite, that the partial, the obscured, the incomplete creates a condition for knowing that the fully revealed cannot. Not because incompleteness is inherently superior, but because completeness tends to produce passive reception while incompleteness demands active participation. And participation is where genuine knowing happens. Essay 7 states this as general principle, but the demonstration accumulates through specific cases. Consider the way Kenko writes about the ceremony, not a specific ceremony, but the structure of ceremony in general. He notes that the parts of a ceremony that move him most are the beginning and the end, the moment when the ritual is taking shape, before it has settled into its full form, still fragile and anticipatory, and the moment when it is ending, when the full form is dissolving back into ordinary time, still present as a quality in the air before it is entirely gone. The middle of the ceremony, the full thing occurring, has resolved into itself. It is what it is, fully. But the beginning and ending are thresholds, moments of becoming and moments of leaving, in which the ceremony is present as a promise or as a memory, neither fully there nor fully gone. These are the moments Kenko finds most alive. Full presence is, paradoxically, less vivid than the approach to presence or the departure from it. Extend this to the seasons, which Kenko does. The end of autumn, when winter has not yet arrived, but autumn is visibly thinning, the quality of light already different, the warmth already diminished, is more interesting to him than autumn at its peak. The last days of spring, when the cherry blossoms have mostly fallen but the spring is still technically present, when you are in the middle of the loss rather than before it or after it. This is the season's most moving moment. Not the fullness, the edge. The Japanese poetic tradition had been cultivating this sensibility for centuries before Kenko. The Manyoshu, the anthology compiled in the 8th century, is full of poems at exactly these threshold moments. But Kenko is the first writer to make the principle explicit, to articulate why the threshold is more alive than the peak, and to extend the principle systematically across everything he looks at. The worn object is the material expression of this principle, and Kenko's treatment of it is one of the Tsurezuregusa's most culturally consequential passages. The bowl that has been cracked and repaired, the wooden handle darkened by decades of use, the silk garment faded by washing and light, each of these carries within it a history that the new object cannot have and cannot perform. The new object is purely potential. It is what it will become, not yet what time and use will make it. It has no past. It is entirely future-facing, which means it is, in the most important sense, not yet real, not yet marked by the specific encounters and resistances and modifications that make a thing genuinely exist in the world, rather than merely exist in the world's inventory. The old object has been somewhere. It has encountered specific circumstances, been used by specific hands, survived or been repaired, accumulated the particular modifications that only duration and use produce. The patina is not damage on top of the object. It is the record of the object's existence, the visible evidence that it has been through time, which is the only way anything fully is. The Japanese tradition of kintsugi, repairing broken ceramics with lacquer mixed with gold or silver, making the repair not merely visible but luminous, is the direct material application of this principle, and it emerges from the same aesthetic world that the Tsurezuregusa articulates. The broken bowl repaired with gold is not being disguised. It is being honored. The break is acknowledged as an event in the object's history. The repair is presented as part of what the object now is, and the gold makes this presentation explicit and beautiful. The bowl that has been broken and repaired is, in this understanding, more interesting than the bowl that has never been broken, because it has a history, because something happened to it, because the visible repair is evidence of survival and of the care that was taken to preserve what might have been discarded. Kenko doesn't describe kintsugi directly. The practice, as we know it, develops later, but he establishes the philosophical ground from which it grows. The overgrown garden is the principle applied to time at its largest scale. a garden that has been allowed to become wild, where the paths are barely visible, where the arrangement that was once imposed on the space has become one layer in an ongoing natural process, is moving in a way that the perfectly maintained garden cannot be. The maintained garden is a statement of control. The human will imposed on nature, held in place by constant effort, presenting a version of nature that has been permanently organized according to human intention. The overgrown garden is a statement of time. What happens when the effort stops? When nature is allowed to do what it always does given sufficient time? When the garden becomes something that is half human arrangement and half natural process, a collaboration that neither party fully controls. The melancholy of the overgrown garden, the suggestion of someone who once cared for this and is no longer here, is part of what Kenko finds beautiful about it. It is evidence of time. It is evidence that the world continues without us, that the world does not hold still to accommodate our arrangements, that the garden we tend will outlast our tending and become something else. This is not a sad fact for Kenko. It is a beautiful one. Together, the cloud-covered moon, the falling blossom, the worn bowl, the overgrown garden, the threshold moment of the ceremony, these constitute what becomes, in later Japanese aesthetic tradition, the core of wabi-sabi, the beauty of the imperfect, the incomplete, the impermanent. Kenko does not name it. The systematization comes later, primarily through the tea ceremony tradition and the figure of Sen no Rikyū in the 16th century, a man who took Kenko's aesthetic intuitions and built from them a complete philosophy of material culture, expressed through the practice of preparing and drinking tea in a small, deliberately imperfect room, using deliberately imperfect objects, in the awareness that the gathering will never occur again in exactly this form. The wabi tea aesthetic is Kenko's Tsurezuregusa made architectural and ritual, the same preference for the partial, the worn, the incomplete, extended from literary observation into a practice of living. Mono no aware, the pathos of things, the specific emotional register produced by the perception of beautiful things passing, is the philosophical concept most immediately associated with the Tsurezuregusa, and for good reason, though the concept is older than the text. The tale of Genji, written 300 years earlier, is the great narrative exploration of Mono no aware. The whole arc of Genji's life is structured around the experience of beautiful things existing and then being lost, and the specific quality of feeling that this generates: the tenderness, the grief, the gratitude, the heightened attention that the awareness of loss produces. But Murasaki Shikibu shows Mono no aware from the inside of a life, through Genji's specific losses, specific loves, specific moments of encountering beauty knowing it will pass. Kenko does something different. He tries to think about it directly, to understand what it is and where it comes from, and why the correct response to it is not simply grief. His answer, accumulating through 243 essays, is that Mono no aware is what perception feels like when it is genuine, when you are actually present to what is in front of you, when you have not armored yourself against the fact that it will end, when you allow the ending to be part of the beauty rather than its negation. The Western resonances are illuminating precisely because of how they differ from Kenko's method. Montaigne, working in France 2.5 centuries later, is engaged in a project of similar ambition, to understand what it is to be human, to be mortal, to pay attention. But he does it noisily, through explicit argument, self-contradiction, the drama of thought caught in the act of changing its mind. His essays are performances of thinking. Kenko's essays are demonstrations of perception. Montaigne tells you what he thinks and how he arrived at it, and why he is no longer sure. Kenko shows you what he sees and trusts that the seeing, accumulated across enough instances, will produce in the reader a corresponding way of seeing rather than a corresponding set of beliefs. The difference is formal, but it is also deeply cultural. The Japanese literary tradition, at its most refined, trusts implication over statement, demonstration over argument, accumulation over conclusion. The Tsurezuregusa is the fullest expression of this trust. That combination of genuine conviction and genuine uncertainty, knowing that impermanence is the central fact of experience, knowing that the correct response is attention rather than accumulation, and still being unable to stop caring about the Heian court, still being pulled by nostalgia for what ended before he was born, still noticing the quality of a well-arranged room with something very close to desire, is the philosophical achievement of the text. The beauty that accumulates at the edges of things, the specific quality of attention that makes any moment more real than it would have been without it. That's all for today on Libyth. One new book every week. At least we try.